You're listening to a CNA podcast.
Hello, it's Andrea Heng, and I'm back with another episode of Money Talks. This is the podcast where we talk about anything and everything to do with your money. Now, if you haven't already, you can follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube Music, because this is how you'll get notified when a new episode drops. So right now, once again, I have June, our Money Talks producer, to give you some quick financial news. June, what's up?
Well, Andrea, the people have spoken, and it seems Singaporeans are handling their finances pretty well.
Oh, that's good news indeed. All right, tell me more.
So the Institute of Policy Studies, which is IPS, and CNE did a joint survey to understand the financial habits of those aged 21 and 39 years old.
Okay.
So almost 90% of respondents say they spend within their income every month. About 70% of them have at least 3 months' worth of expenses set aside.
Well, IPS needs to survey me. Those numbers might look a little different, but that's another story for another day. But yes, totally agree. An emergency fund is absolutely crucial for that rainy day. I mean, come on. It's one of the things we say all the time here on Money Talks, right?
Absolutely. And about 70% say they have a retirement savings plan. And those who are in their 30s are likely to stick to the plan.
Okay.
And what's interesting is that about 65% of those surveyed have used a buy now, pay later plan. And it's mostly those who are earning high incomes or have credit cards.
All in all, it's good to know that younger Singaporeans not so impulsive when it comes to their spending, because I wasn't like that when I was their age. All right, so what's next on the list?
Okay, so we've been following the electric vehicle industry for a while now, and it's not been a great year so far for Tesla.
I know.
Right? So the automaker's first quarter deliveries missed market expectations.
Okay. By how much did they miss the mark?
So sales dropped by 20% compared to the previous quarter.
Ouch.
And Tesla shares have also fallen about 37% this year.
Double ouch. Okay, so wait a minute. Didn't Tesla also recently announce a layoff?
Correct. So according to an internal memo seen by Reuters, it will lay off more than 10% of its global workforce.
Oh dear. So it looks like it's back to the drawing board for Elon Musk.
Yeah, but a little bit of good news for those in the US, though, who are thinking of buying a Tesla.
Okay.
So the company has announced it will be cutting the US prices of its Model Y, Model X, and Model S vehicles by $2,000.
Yeah, hopefully it translates to some savings here in our part of the world. So that's June with the news nuggets of the week. Here's another quick update. If you've been following me on Instagram, TikTok, you'd know that the Money Talks team has dared me to a bunch of personal finance challenges. This is all to see if I can cultivate some better financial habits. Well, you know what? I'm here to announce that the first official challenge is to travel by public transport for a month. Now, my transport to work in the early mornings is paid for because I host the morning show on CNA 938, so that's a caveat. But otherwise, for this challenge, I am going to document myself taking public transport and any other free modes of transport like, corporate shuttle buses, that sort of thing. And I'm going to do this everywhere, every day for a month. How big of a difference will this make to my monthly savings? Well, the only way that you can find out is to follow me on Instagram and TikTok. Just look up andreaheng.cna and you can check in on me. You know what? I'll also appreciate some tips or hacks that you have. Really grateful if you could send me those as well. And most importantly, please wish me luck, the good people of the Money Talks podcast. Hey everyone, today's episode is a little different from what we usually do. We're working in collaboration with the Ministry of Finance in support of Budget 2024. So it's been about 2 months since the budget was announced. There was a lot to sift through, and we know it's near impossible to go into the details. Well, Money Talks is here to help. So for this episode specifically, we want to focus on the targeted support for businesses and corresponding workforce. So we're going to cover as much as possible, from loans to staff training budgets to coping with higher energy and rental costs. And to help me do that is Hsin Chong. He is the Managing Director at BNL. Now, BNL is an integrated environmental management consultancy that is based right here in Singapore. So he is local, the company is local, no better person to talk about this with us than Hsin Chong. Hey, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you very much.
Okay, so let's start by getting to know you. The first thing I said to you when you walked through that door today was, wow, you're very young. So I'm not going to ask you your age. That's a bit too personal, but you are also a very young managing director. So you're managing director of BNL. Describe to us what this role involves.
Right. So BNL is an environmental services company. We basically do cleaning, landscaping, and waste management.
Okay.
So being in the managing director position, I kind of have to oversee all these services that we provide to our clients. So it can either be just cleaning itself, or it can be a combination of everything into one.
Okay.
And I basically have to oversee everything from HR to tendering, business development, marketing itself. So yeah, kind of everything popped into one. Yeah.
AKA a very busy guy.
Sometimes.
Okay, so you joined in 2019. At that point, what was the first thing that went through your mind when it came to prioritizing the things that the company needed done?
I think stepping in right before the pandemic was a very interesting period. Why? It's because you then had to see what is actually going on in the backbone of the company
Okay.
to get yourself prepared for the pandemic.
Yeah.
Right? So you kind of start to realize that, hey, look, I have to digitally transform the whole company from paper trails to digital trails.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and
And that's a mammoth effort.
exactly. So, but somehow COVID gave us the time to really restructure and look at it properly. So during the lockdown period, you just hit down pen to paper and think, what can I do? Where do I start? That gave us kind of a breather
Okay.
to really step back and see that, hey, look, how do I change something that's a bit more traditional to something that is more modernized, I would say. Because everyone was saying it has to go contactless.
Yeah.
You know, meetings have to be online.
Yeah.
Everything turns online. And as a company that's very traditional, everything is on paper.
Yeah.
You start to think, wait a minute, how am I going to do this, you know? And then you take a step back and say, okay, look, everything needs to change,
Yeah.
right? So you kind of get swarmed with a wave of emotions as well, because you're thinking, I don't have this. So what do I have to do first? What's the most important thing?
Exactly, yeah. How did you decide, okay, we're going to do this first and then we'll do that next, and so on and so forth? So how did you approach your to-do list?
Everything falls down to what our business needs and what our client needs are, because they're very intertwined.
Yeah.
So for our business needs, firstly, because we focus on a lot of human labor, just pure labor itself.
Yeah.
So then, firstly, is what makes me operable? What enables my company to continue running even if they are not there in person?
Right.
So then that becomes all the tools that you require to communicate with people.
Yeah.
So during that period of time, I'm sure everyone was talking about Zoom.
Yep.
You know, that everyone got into the whole video call game.
Yep.
Right. So then we had to say, all right, let's get onto it immediately.
Okay.
All meetings had to be turned online.
Right.
And then the next thing we had to remember is that, hey, we're actually a human capital company.
Right.
So my HR is the most important thing, is the backbone of the company. So then how do I transform my HR to ensure that it still runs?
Yeah.
And the message from the company itself is still able to reach the people on the ground. So one thing that we had, which irked me the longest of time,
Oh dear.
right, is paper timesheets. And how can we move away from it
Yes.
as quickly as possible? The thing about paper timesheets, it's kind of convenient,
I mean, it's instinctive.
right?
To
It's
a lot
instinctive.
Of us.
You know,
Yeah.
the first thing you do is you walk there and you just sign on something.
Yeah.
But then now we had to think of an app that we could implement so that everyone gets onto it.
Yes.
But then the next problem comes, which is not everyone wants to download the app.
Exactly.
Right? Some people don't have smartphones.
Yeah.
You know,
Precisely.
which is why during that period of time,
Trace together token.
yeah, the trace together token.
Yeah.
So there's a group of people who don't want to get the app, but rather use the token.
Correct.
So that's the same group of people that I would also have to convince or rather train them
Yeah.
to use smartphones.
And I imagine there obviously are going to be financial costs
Yeah.
related to those changes, right? I mean, talk to us about the financial costs. How did you assess and then therefore budget what you needed to spend on in order to effect these changes?
So when we look into the digital system that we had to implement, thankfully, there are quite a lot of ready-made systems out there that we can actually use. And how do we then know of it is because they would also have on their little ad that says, oh, we are government approved. You know, we are PSG approved.
It's like the best kind of
right?
approval, right?
Then the thing
Peace
is,
of mind.
you think, oh wait, there's a grant available for this, right? So then
Right.
you start to think to yourself that, hey, look, this system is available out there. There's a grant that we can tap on, which gives us a funding of up to a certain percentage, and we're able to tap onto that, right? So then we can think, okay, this cost can be defrayed by the government.
Yeah.
The other percentage we have to cover ourselves, which we see as an investment to the future. For us to be able to use this system for a long period of time, we think, you know what, it's worth it.
Yeah.
Then the next problem comes, which is I now have to implement this
Oh,
and
yeah.
get everybody trained. And training is a cost itself,
Oh, yes.
right? So when you have the app, yes, money up front,
Yeah.
right? You do all the modifications to get it working. Then after that, training comes.
Yeah.
But what's the cheapest way that we can do it? I think what we did there, thankfully, was that our operational managers, supervisors, we could train them
Yep.
so they could train the rest. So we
Yeah.
have basically workplace champions,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And we'll teach them, and then they go to the ground
Yeah.
and teach the rest.
Because there's no better influence than ground
Exactly.
influence, right?
Right.
And it's less intimidating too, right?
Correct.
Because you don't feel like you need to take time off work to go
Yeah.
into this other place.
Exactly.
And you have this employee guilt as well,
Yep.
taking time off just to
That's
go for
right.
this training. And so now everyone's on board.
Everyone's on board. Yeah.
4 years later, look
Yeah,
at you
4 years
guys. But the thing is, budgets are quite finite, right? I mean, what kind of decisions did you make budget-wise in terms of how to strategize where you were spending that money to train them?
So we work in an industry where training is actually mandatory at almost every level. So the thing here is that what is the most cost-efficient way for us to encourage everyone to go for training? So what we then do is identify the group that is able to influence the workforce to buy into training. Because if these people are the ones who believe in training already, for that to kind of cascade down, they would encourage them to go for the training. So then we think about the finances behind
Yeah.
how this is going to be structured, right?
Yep.
Because we have all these workers that we know the time is going to come for us to send them for training,
Yes.
right? So then we had to think about what happens to the operability of the company.
Correct.
Right?
Exactly.
Because we have manual labor that needs to be done, right? If they go for training, no one's going to be doing it.
Exactly.
This
The
table won't be
rostering
clean.
gets messed
Right,
up and
exactly.
so many logistical nightmares.
Correct. So there's quite a few implications behind training itself. Cost is one. Operability is definitely one. And then the next thing is, what's the continuity of this training? So all of these kind of fall into it, which is what we will have to think of. And that's how we kind of start before we structure the next 2 years. Because we know when it's coming.
So what a lot of us don't understand is how management handles costs, right?
Yep.
This year's budget, I just want to turn our attention to that now. This year's budget had a big chunk set aside for businesses. How do you look at what's in the bag for you? And how do you decide what you should be tapping on and what you can tap on to really maximize the benefits?
I think this budget is basically an enhancement of our previous budgets. It adds on,
Yeah.
right? So then back to how I thought about it during the COVID pandemic period,
Right.
is to prioritize. I know why I need to change.
Yeah.
And then from there, I look into our grants portal and then I look, okay, let's click on it. This looks like, I can get something out of this. You go into it and you realize that, okay, this grant is available. What can I do with this grant and how does it link to my top priority?
Right.
And then I slowly work down into it because there's honestly a lot available. So if we even look into EDG grants, right,
Yeah.
you then realize that, hey, look, there's something that helps me with my branding. So there are things in there that you realize that, hey, it actually helps me transform, because especially during the pandemic, everything shifted online,
Yes.
right? How am I going to improve my branding or my marketing strategy so that I can become more noticed online? There's a grant that's available for you,
There you go.
and they'll help you out along the way. How I take something traditional and I turn it modern, you have experts there who are available
Yeah.
and approved by the government to say that, hey, look, use this money and help the companies out there.
Yeah.
And you can tap onto that and they're able to help you.
Wow.
And other things such as training. I think everyone has been looking at the SFEC, which is the SkillsFuture Enterprise Credit.
Yeah.
Every company gets that.
It's quite generous.
And this goes towards the training that we do. And most trainings are subsidized already.
Correct. That's
right?
the thing. Yeah.
They're subsidized already.
So
and
that
then
$10,000 actually can go a long way.
it can go a long way because it then gives you the flexibility to say that, all right, I can cater for my training. Because firstly, it's very subsidized.
Correct.
Right? And then now you have the SkillsFuture Enterprise Credit.
So all I need to do is roster the people to go to that training.
Right. So this SFEC as well, it is not just purely into that training portion, but it can go into anything that is based on human capital. I can think about HR system. I want to implement it. I can tap on the SFEC. So the grant has a lot of flexibility. It is not hard and fast into one thing
Yeah.
and one thing only.
Correct.
But you can really maneuver around it and
Yeah.
say that, all right, this will help my company the most. What grant can I tap onto that will help me maximize this and give me a longer runway,
Yeah.
right? Because at the end of the day, this runway is cash flow. If I got no cash flow, then this company can't last.
Yeah.
So that's how we have to plan for it.
Yeah.
I think it's about how far can I stretch my dollar. And the government has given a lot of subsidies, grants, and working together with banks to help us stretch the dollar.
Yeah.
But stretching the dollar means that you will need to be ready to invest a portion of it as well to better the company, because having cash doesn't mean that you'll survive the next 5 years, the
Oh,
next
of
10
course.
years.
It's not
right?
guaranteed. You
Your
have to want it.
company
as
has to
well.
transform as well.
Exactly.
Right? To get it ready for the next economic cycle.
Yes. The $1.3 billion enterprise support package, this overarching package that was announced, it's meant to help and send you and your staff for better training, to help you better your business, grow it, etc. But there's also other costs, right? Like your wages, rental has gone up, utility bills have gone up as well. I'm just trying to get a clear sense of how much these particular expenses make up a business's expenditure. Is it a lot?
Naturally, it will be a sizable amount, but it would also depend on what industry you're in, right?
I
So
see.
if you talk about wages, will be the bulk of what my expenses will be,
Right.
right? Because we have to hire all these workers.
Yeah.
But if you're doing something that is a high value product, right, that is maybe very possibly tech based,
Yes.
right, then it could be that your product is very high yielding and you do not need as much employees. However, the value of your employees is higher. The
Correct.
wages you pay is higher
Correct.
per person.
Correct.
And maybe the value that they do give you as one person is also going to be slightly higher in terms of their expertise
Correct.
into that industry. So it's different to speak about that,
Okay.
right? But then you also have a lot of money that needs to go into technological investment,
Yeah. Innovation.
developing and things
Yeah.
like that, which is for tech company. But for us, it's the equipment that you need,
Yeah.
the wages that you need to pay, the training that a person needs to go through. So it's just the nature of your business will also mean that the proportion which you budget will also be different.
Yeah.
So it really depends on how your business is structured, the nature of the business, and where do you see your business in the next 5 to 10 years,
Yeah.
right? Before you lay out your roadmap for yourself and say that, all right, I have to hit this target by year 2028.
For sure. There's also this existing scheme called the Enterprise Financing Scheme. And I think you talked about this briefly earlier about the various loans that will be enhanced this year. You mentioned, I think, the EFS SME Working Capital Loan, there's the trade loan, there's
Yep.
a project loan. If I'm reading this right, this means companies can borrow money, essentially, from the government for projects like overseas expansion, for example. Am I reading this right?
Yes, more or less. So you basically get a loan from the banks at the interest rate. I can't remember what's the exact interest rate
Sure.
right now. But you get a loan at that interest rate. And basically it allows you to, yet again, venture off into an overseas market. And this tags along very well with another grant, which is for, I believe it's market readiness,
Right.
something under EDG as well,
Okay.
right? Where they help you to look into overseas markets as well. So you can have extra capital to work with for you to expand overseas. And you basically can tap on the expertise that the government is rolling out for you to help you think about, can I go overseas?
Now I want to turn our focus a little bit back to training. And in this context of support for businesses, there's the SkillsFuture Enterprise Credit, which you mentioned just now, SFEC. It's a $10,000 credit. The good news is this will be extended to June 30th, 2025. So it gives us, first off, this means that both employees and employers have money to tap on to go for training, right? Like it's a two-pronged benefit here. Am I reading this correctly?
Yes. So what you would then have is, in a way, flexibility, right? Employers would then firstly be able to map out our training, because there'll be mandatory training.
Yes.
So you will have to start sending people for this.
Correct.
But at the same time, it encourages individuals to want to upskill themselves
Yeah.
or potentially reskill themselves, right? There's so many of these courses out there that
Yeah.
enables you to upskill yourself. The thing is that we are in an environment where everything's moving so fast.
Yeah.
You need all the help you can get. And the government is saying that, you know what, I'm going to give you all the help you need.
Yeah.
They make it so accessible for you because you're bettering the whole economy by doing something
because
like this.
you really don't want to be left out here. I think also there's value in creating that sense of desire to learn, especially in the older folks, because it makes them feel wanted, it makes them feel valued, it makes them feel useful. And I think we need that more than ever because our retirement age is getting older and older.
Like what you mentioned about the older generation, I guess them wanting all of that is also a result of them being afraid, right?
Yeah.
They're afraid of that change, you know,
Yes.
which is why we make it as accessible to them as possible so that they get encouraged to do it, making it simplified.
Yeah. So you've got the spurs to tap into training, some subsidies on taxes. How does that factor into your overall planning in terms of finances while weighing all these support measures and grants that you have available at your disposal?
I think what we have here is a trickle-down effect. I mean, based on inflation, based on wages that needs to go up because of inflation, you know, all this is kind of like your overheads. This
Yeah.
is something that you have to kind of project for the next 5-10 years. But however, some of these costs, it's kind of like a cycle, right? When there's inflation, price of products go up because wages go up,
Yeah.
right? Expected salaries keep going up, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting because that means that everyone is expecting a certain amount.
Yes.
But this is the backbone or the back end of what creates the products.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yes.
then there has to be a balance.
Yeah.
Right? We can't be expecting everything to be the same price. It can also be just what's the standing of the economy right now.
Yes.
Right? Geopolitics come into play here. We can take a look around the global markets. You know, we can see something happening in the US and we will just think about, oh, okay, price of this is going to go up.
Yeah.
Something happens in another country, we're like, oh, the price of this is going to come down.
Yeah.
So it's also hard for us to exactly dictate what is going to happen.
Yeah.
But we can only be best prepared for it,
Correct.
right? And having all these grants and subsidies is basically helping us to prepare for the future.
I couldn't have said it better because you often think of these measures as a band-aid,
Yeah.
a solution to fix problems.
Yep.
Rarely do we think of it as, I need to do this to be prepared.
Yeah.
I'll deal with it later. I think that's a mindset that all of us need to change, whether it's workers, whether it's
Yep.
businesses, individuals as well. It's really thinking about the future. It's been great to have you on Money Talks to talk us through this. But before we let you go,
Okay.
there's one thing we need you to do. There's a new segment on Money Talks and it's called Questions from a Hat. It is pretty straightforward. So there are 5 questions in this hat. All you need to do is pick one and you hand it to me and I'll read it out. Oh, this is a nice one. All right, Hsin Chong. What financial advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
Step 1, plan your financials well, right? If you can save more, be careful with what you are doing with your money, right? Money doesn't come easy. It takes a lot of blood, sweat, tears for you to earn money. So be thrifty with it. You took time to earn it, so don't go crazy.
Yeah, well done. Okay, Hsin Chong, thanks again for coming on the podcast.
Pleasure.
It's been fun.
Yeah, it's been fun.
You have been great company. And speaking of company, listener, thank you as well for yours. Don't forget to let us know what you think of this episode, okay? Leave your feedback in the comments section. I promise you, we actually do read them. We are up on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, YouTube Music as well. And if you really like what you hear on the Money Talks podcast, rate us and rate us highly, please. My final thank yous go to the Money Talks team, of course. Crispino Robert, Tiffany Ang, Janaini Johari, Joanne Chan, Saya Wint. I am Andrea Heng. I will catch you in the next episode.